Anyway, the background to tonight is we do quite clearly have a key point in the life cycle of our river, the River Severn, in which it's doing some quite aggressive, boiling, horrible things outside. I know for those who are at risk from flooding, this is a very tense evening in which half of their minds will be distracted. And I think this evening we will touch on some of those issues about how do we respond to that? What can we do? How does it affect our working lives, our families, our businesses, our occupations? And trying to get to grips with all the different notions of what to do, how to approach the challenges of living with a natural environment that for so long now we've been at odds with. Our relationship with nature has been a troubled one, and I think it's time for us to roll into our debate this evening. Now I've got a number of guests who are going to join me at various different points to help me explore some of the themes, the ideas, and possibly the opportunities we've got to do things to protect our river, the opportunities we've got to think differently about water and the way it interacts with our lives. So shortly I'm going to hand over to one of my colleagues, Michelle, to talk about us as an organisation. The Shropshire Wildlife Trust has been around since 1962. We're part of a network of over 40 wildlife trusts around the UK, and I'm going to hand over to Michelle, but also just give me an opportunity just to test the technology as well. So I'm going to have a go at sharing the screen. There we go, and let's see if that works, and then I'll start that up. Press that button there. Now we found earlier that we had a little bit of a lag on this. So as I say, you've got the speaker screen on the right hand side. You can move it around, and maybe this is an opportunity just to do that while we're getting settled into the evening. And just before I hand over to Michelle, this evening we've got quite a lot we're going to try and pack in. There's lots of things are happening all at once, and if not most of them, if not all of them, are quite complex. So this will seem a little bit like a pell-mell rush through some really big issues. But what I probably would just set out now is if you feel this kind of session is useful, just let us know, and then maybe in the near future we can have a much more slower paced event in which we explore at a greater depth some of the things that we've raised this evening, because as I say, they're big. We're going to look at the dam idea that's rattling around in the news. We're going to look at the Northwest Road that not only in the news, is coming at us at great speed to some planning department just not too far away from where some of you are sitting. And then we're going to look at some of the alternatives around transport proposals. We're going to look at alternatives to hard engineering. And as I say, I've got some guests to help me tease out what those things are all about, and make sure that I'm just not looking through one set of very, very thick spectacles. They get heavier as I get older, to make sure that we've got a broader view on what's happening in our county. Anyway, let's test this out. Brilliant. So I'm going to hand over to Michelle, who's just going to run through some stuff for us to let you know all about what we do and how you can help support us. Michelle.
Thank you, Pete. So yeah, my name, as you know, is Michelle. I'm actually the River Team Support Officer for Shropshire Wildlife Trust. And I just wanted to actually just bullet point a few things that we do for those of you that are not so familiar. So we actually care for over 40 nature reserves around the county. So these include woodlands, meadows and wetlands that are havens for birds. We also campaign to protect the local environments, and we run an extensive events program throughout the year, obviously COVID allowing, but some of the things you'll see that we've adapted, and we're actually putting on more online events for you to get involved with this year. We work with around 2,000 school children. So I think there's a shocking stat that 1 in 3 children are connected to nature now. and that they're less connected than we were sort of 50 years ago. So we have an education department that actually are out and about visiting schools and running a program of activities throughout the years to sort of rectify this. And we work with hundreds of landowners, such as farmers and organisations. And we're basically here to give nature and ourselves a helping hand. So everything from our freshwater species to pine martens, hedgehogs, and you'll probably hear a little bit more about the reintroduction of species such as our beavers. So that's us really, just to summarise. And finally, but not least, is our rivers and our brooks and our streams. So I know Pete's going to talk about this in his presentation, so you can learn more about that shortly. But one thing I'm sort of asking for you guys that are here is to actually, you know, help us. So in January, we do actually have a January sale at Shropshire Wildlife Trust, and this is going on until the end of January, where it's half price. So within that membership, you can actually join as an individual or joint member from £1.50 a month, or from a family membership from £2.50 a month. So you receive a welcome pack, magazines throughout the year. If you're joining as a family, we have some actually fantastic children's magazines that are age specific and connected to the national curriculum. And it's actually a perfect way for homeschooling. So if you've got children at home, I thoroughly recommend you get involved. With that, you'll receive our reserve guide. So if you've got some local walks and local reserves to you, you know exactly where they are. As well as I mentioned before, our events guide and your car sticker to show your support. So that's our membership sort of in a nutshell. Pete's going to turn to the next slide now. Thank you, Pete. And you'll find different links to some of the things we're doing. So membership, you'll see there's a link to our membership page there. And we'd really, really like you to join us if you're not already a member. For those that are, thank you very much. It really helps us to continue the work that we're doing. There's also other ways you can get involved, from looking at our apps you can get involved with, to also adoption of different species. So on that note, I'm not going to ramble on. I'll pass you back over to Pete. So thank you very much, and have a good evening.
Thank you, Michelle. That was really helpful. So, you know, a membership organisation, but we have challenges come at us at a great rate. And some of those are alerted to us. Some of that we're not particularly conscious of. We don't know their issues. And I think what we can do, I'm pressing a few buttons here at this end. We got there eventually. Lots of clicking. Hope that wasn't too loud in your earphones. So one of these issues is water quality. Now, we're clear that there's challenges from highway runoff. There's challenges from diffuse pollution from sources such as agriculture or from development or construction work. There's problems with the quality of our rain, quite simply. That's picking up particulate matter. There's a whole range of things. Now, we know that regulation has slowly tightened the screw on point source pollution. That's pipe delivered pollution. Of whether it's industrial chemicals or otherwise, and standards have been set and are embodied in law. Now, these regulated standards around water quality still mean that our ageing infrastructure is legally permitted to discharge into our rivers. Now, in 2019, all the data from these legally regulated discharges was gathered together by the Rivers Trust. And they produced this incredibly informative and, I must say, alarming website that you can investigate your local patch. And they ask a really pertinent question: is your river fit to play in? And as we drill down on this lovely map, I do like a map, always fond of a map. I notice there's different size circles, and they imply talk about different spill durations. So, and they've been monitored. And if I click on one of them, it will tell me what's happening at that location. It's permitted, so it's legal. But this is a sewer storm overflow. It's a combined sewer overflow. They're designed in normal flows, normal periods of time, to capture untreated domestic effluent or commercial effluent and carry that to a treatment works. But in a storm situation, rather like today, when the waters are high, there's peak flows, there's a lot of water around. To avoid that sewage being pushed back up the pipe, these combined storm overflows actually spill out and chuck that effluent straight into the river untreated. Now, this is an issue raised to me by concerned individuals within Shrewsbury, because they've noticed things like the indestructible wet wipe hanging in trees down by the weir, clearly in great quantity. And where's that come from? We've got storm sewer containers, tanks that again are helping there to manage that pressure. And earlier last year, Philip Dunn, the Ludlow MP, who's now the chair of the Environmental Audit Committee, put him and his campaign team shoulders behind an effort to push a private member's bill to raise those water quality standards up. We, Severn Rivers Trust, Shrewsbury Fisheries Association, and many others, or Shrewsbury Town Fisheries, decided that's a right and proper thing to stick our shoulders behind. And a couple of weeks ago, Shrewsbury Town Council voted to make this a priority and to write to their local MP. Now, the latest news on this is that because of the pressures around COVID, that Philip Dunn's bill has been postponed, and the heat's slightly gone out of the campaign. It's always good to have a campaign with a target, but unfortunately in this case, the target shifted. Now, what it has left behind is a legacy of stuff we've now seen that we can't forget. And I was just going to invite Andy Jones from Shrewsbury Town Fisheries, the coordinator for the fisheries in town. I wonder if Andy could just join me if you unmute and just tell me, what impact does this untreated effluent have on the river as it passes through town? I'll turn this website off, Andy, because I think we've seen enough of those horrific grey blobs. Are we there, Andy? Not now, but you're okay. You're there, though. You're with us. Thank you, Andy, for joining us this evening. From home, safe at home, I hope. So, yes. Andy, we've, thanks to the Rivers Trust, we've learned an awful lot, and also the alarm was raised quite a long time ago by yourself and your members about the effluent that was being discharged into the river in town. What impacts will that have?
Well, the impacts, first of all, we're in a town centre and we're in a park, so that we've got fisheries such as the quarry, which also is a public area.
Yeah.
But a lot of people up to now don't actually realise what is actually going on underneath the surface. As far as angling's concerned, well, obviously we're fishing all the time, and all our anglers are on the bank.
Yeah.
And whilst they're fishing, they've been collecting this debris on their lines and having to handle it. But we've also found that it's also made the river very moody. I mean, I've run a lot of very large competitions, festivals with a lot of the best anglers throughout the UK who've attended these competitions. And we've had periods of time where the fish have sort of died, the fishing has died. I mean, I was fishing one competition about 3 years ago, and we had a very heavy rainstorm at around about 10 o'clock on it was a 3-day festival, which was a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. On the Wednesday, we had a very heavy shower on the Wednesday morning, first thing. And at 11 o'clock, I was on a particular location where I was fishing in the competition, and I noticed down by my feet the effluent coming into the river, and it was just like it was snowing.
Right.
Up to that moment, everybody was catching on the river, and these are some of the best guys in the country, and all of a sudden the river just switched off. and all we could catch then was everything that was coming in the river. So you name it, toilet rolls, etc. So this aspect, in a broad term, has tended to make it very moody in Shrewsbury. I do feel that also this stuff that's going into the river must have an effect on the river bed, because even though it's supposed to go in high water, I do know that last summer it has gone in on summer levels.
Right. Okay.
And that should not be permitted, because there's no flow to take that away.
Yeah.
It's bound to have a profound effect on fish stocks over the period, because if their spawning grounds are littered with this stuff and they need clean gravels, they need weed. If this is littered with this debris, it must have a profound effect of what they should be able to do naturally, and that's breed. So, and that has a knock-on effect for all the wildlife. So we talk about fish below the surface, which majority of people don't see. We do. But it's what's happening. It's bound to have a profound effect above. So we have actually seen it all hanging in the trees, even in the quarry in a public park. And like I highlighted to the Shrewsbury Town Council, I said, surely this is not right for a public area with this stuff on display in the trees. And it's not a bit, it's a lot. So so that's some of the effects. I mean, I could talk about it for a long time. I've talked with the EA about it, and we have our various points. But my personal view is we need to stop putting anything into the Severn, whether it be sewage or whatever it may be, because it all has an effect on Mother Nature, and we should look after Mother Nature. She'll look after herself if we look after her.
So the website, Andy, the Rivers Trust website, you're
Yes.
starting to put in. It wasn't just your anecdotal feeling that you've got these fish moving out and you're seeing something wrong with the water. There's actually evidence that these discharges are happening
Yes.
at a colossal rate. So you've got evidence to go with your observations of the impact on the fish on the bend around the town.
Yeah. Well, we tend to find that when this stuff comes in, the fish will vacate. They need to get out of it. It's just the same as us. If you were at home and all of a sudden your room or your household filled with something that is poisonous to you, you get out of it. And fish will do that. And they'll move out, they'll move up to the tributaries, but this is affecting some of the tributaries as well. So like our Reed Brook, etc., we've got sewage going into that.
Yeah.
And it's all along the whole length. It makes the whole, so it's not just Shrewsbury, but Shrewsbury has always been known as one of the key venues for angling throughout the UK. A lot of people come here, and it's a shame, looking at our point of view, that this is happening. Andy,
on top of the effect on the fish population, you've raised issues there about public health.
Yes.
And there's also an economic dimension as well. That means there's a driver to investing in preventing effluent, because it does impact on the business of the town, which is, not just anglers, rowers, wild swimmers, kayakers, the river's a busy place, isn't it?
It does. I know that I respect the angling or represent the angling side of the issue, but there's a whole lot of different people that use the facilities, and they may not be totally aware of what is really going on. So you've got your dog walkers, they're in the river in the summer with and perhaps with their families. They don't realize what is actually beneath the water that is there present, and it is there. There's the rowers. I've had conversations with the rowing clubs about this, and they fully support what we're doing. You know, and it's not trying to make a big hoo-ha on the public. It's just we need to sort this out. In this day and age, the Severn, or any river for that matter, but the Severn shouldn't be used as a dumping ground. And at the end of the day, as like I've said numerous amounts of times, if I turned up in the quarry tomorrow with a lorry load of wet wipes and tipped it in the river, I'd be banged to rights. But it is happening through the water companies.
Andy, thank you very much. I think the access to the website is there for people to follow up and have a look and explore this issue. And I think you've made it extremely clear that in the long term, whether it's regulation changes or infrastructure or pipes change, this is not a sustainable position. We've come a long way in terms of how we manage effluent, domestic sewage, but we've clearly got a long way to go. Thank you very much, Andy.
Yeah. One point I would like to just quickly add in as well, one important point, is our beloved salmon. We're out to protect our salmon at the moment, and they need protecting. And one of these outflows is actually in the Salmon Pass at the weir in Shrewsbury, and that was discharged, and those salmon rely on this pass to proceed up the river. When it comes to the aspect of the dam as well, they're spending an awful lot of money at the moment making it easier for fish to migrate up the river, and the dam may have consequences. Why do we need to put another obstruction into the river as well? So that's just one point I want to broadly add to that.
I mean, that's well made, and I think we're going to be coming back to that later in the event this evening. Andy, thank you very much. If you just stick with us, we will try and fit in a question and answer session at the end of the event. But thank you, Andy, that's brilliant. So I'm going to attempt a bit of technological wizardry again. So what we're going to roll out. So we've got a concern, a challenge, an issue around water quality, full stop, related to the sewage infrastructure, and we know that will cost a lot of money. And I think the question that we need to ask is those that have got the power to invest and create those business plans, whether that's politicians, regulators, or your water companies, the utility companies, is what's the plan, folks? How can we help? Clearly the wet wipes are coming from somewhere, so we do have a domestic personal responsibility, but there's also an organisational corporate responsibility. So that's currently where we're at with that one. Now, in February, just to change the topic quite quickly, there is going to be a plan application. It's going to be submitted from Shropshire Council for the Northwest Road. They call it Northwest Relief Road, but I'm not sure that relief is quite what it's going to do. So I'm just going to have a little flyover. They've provided this lovely video for us to view, just to check it out. Where's this road going? What do we think is going to happen as it travels there? So here we go. I'm just going to run it and let's see. So we clearly got over the Welsh Pool end of things where I commute past when I am working in Shrewsbury when the office is open. That roundabout will experience a bit of change. I quite like this video really because it just shows me the greenery around. The kidney-shaped pool to the left is a balancing pool to help manage the water on the road. Most of them should be designed also with a reed bed system to treat salt. Salt on roads, when it finds its way into freshwater habitats, is actually toxic at high levels. Reed bed systems have to be designed to cope with that, so when they discharge into the actual watercourses, they can manage that toxicity level, and I mean lethal to aquatic invertebrates. One thing I noticed about the road is it cuts up and down. There's going to be an awful lot of material going to be moved during the construction phase, which is always risky. You move in soil and sediment. The other thing I noticed is to the right-hand side of the road, to the southern side, is the road begins to embrace a wedge of what is currently open countryside. Countryside that under the big town plan is called the Green Wedge. It's in there because when you drive into Shrewsbury from the north, as I do, it's only in the last few moments that you realise you're in the middle of town, because you're embraced by countryside on both sides. Clearly there'll be hopefully additional tree planting to manage the noise caused by what is going to be a single carriageway road. And there's obviously the usual civil engineering wonders of bridges and concrete and cranes being in action. But clearly it's going to start to transform the northern part of Shrewsbury, that open ground, that countryside. And what tends to happen from my experience, the older I get, the more confirmed I is once you build a road system across open countryside, you start to divide it up into segments, like some horrific Mondrian painting in which the bits that are captured between the roads will eventually get coloured in with other development. There's going to be another roundabout, there's more land to take. And also, as I say, we're starting to bump along the edges of town. There will need to be more compensation as the road is built in terms of additional habitat. This will be young habitat. It's not ancient semi-natural woodland. And if any of that is lost, it takes 600 years plus in order to regain its value. Back in Kent, where I used to live, they attempted to transplant a 20-acre woodland by digging it up, roots and all. And slowly over the next few years, all those lovely standard trees died. And it wasn't really the same woodland. Now I'm just going to pause here. So the new road has to pass over the Severn. In this illustration here, it flies across the Severn on high posts. So the river, as it goes up and down, can probably pass underneath it. The floodplain interference is minimal. But just to the right here, we have another one of these pools to treat road runoff. Also in this proximity, this is in proximity of Shelton Rough. Somewhere here we have the intake. Now I can't remember where it's upstream possibly or downstream, but the intake for the water supply for Shrewsbury and many other communities in this part of Shropshire. That water intake, I went and visited the water treatment works a few years ago, and I was shown into the, I think they call it the sniffer room, in which there's a glass tube in which they attempted by nostril alone to detect any diesel spills in the river. And if they did, they would shut the valve, the intake valve, and then they'd have to rely on that plug of pollution moving down the river so they could reopen the intake and draw up water. Now, I remember years ago when I was doing a bit more sort of countryside ranger in, approaching a burnt out car, and then I was asked to leave it alone quite plainly, in plain language, because burnt out cars tend to create just a big pile of blackened cancer producing chemicals. They're really toxic, burnt out cars. Burnt out lorries are even worse because there's sheer mass against us. Now, I look at the river there and I just had a look at the Water Framework Directive reasons for failure, because the River Severn isn't in good nick. I think it's either moderate and hanging on just about. Two of the chemicals that push down that status for the river are partial combustion derivatives of diesel and partial combustion derivatives of petrol. So when a car is running poorly, it will issue these two chemicals. They're highly pollutant. When it rains, the rain will collect it off of the road, and without considerable care, that tends to go into the local waterways. So that you start to think about the wisdom of doing this. Now, as a commuter, I know, I'm going to restart the film, that possibly this will help me get around the county. This may shave a few moments of time off here and there. Having grown up in London, I have to be honest, the traffic I get stuck in is nothing. bit of perspective. I've travelled in Paris as well and in Rome. A bit of perspective. Oh, this isn't so bad. We could do it, shifting some of the traffic out of the town centre. But what's the cost benefit of investing in this large road that's going to pose quite a large threat to water quality, water availability? There's a groundwater zone, water protection zone, precise in this area, as well as the losses to amenity and landscape and aesthetics and noise. And I think there's some challenges there for us all, really, to consider. Do we support the growth of infrastructure? Is there an economic benefit, which is going to sweep back over the river now? And well on our way to getting back into open countryside again. Is the cost benefit worth it? Are we going to let the road through because we think it will be okay? Or again, do we look off to the right hand side and look at that open countryside and go, oh, hang on a minute, I don't think that's going to stay open for very long. We've just created a route in order to create a spur, and once the spur's done, we'll grab that, we'll release that or unblock that infrastructure, that development land, and maybe there's an economic benefit for building this road that will come at the cost of the landscape. Is it a choice we want to make? I've noticed that there's pedestrians walking alongside this road. Maybe myself as a cyclist, though I don't go very fast these days, maybe I'd go along that, or maybe I won't. I also think there's an opportunity that this road not only bisects the countryside and divides it up into small segments. This is the Berwick Road, one of an absolutely delightful little route back into the centre of town, really quiet most days. And the opportunities to protect that. There's another water attenuation stroke treatment pond to the left there. But as a single carriageway, will eventually it be too small, and we'll be demanding another lane, another carriageway. And having grown up with the M25 as a companion for most of my adult life until a few years ago, that was never big enough. I spent many a miserable night and day sitting there wondering, I'm sure there's another way, there must be an alternative. The other thing is the positioning, we have a number of pedestrian crossings which hopefully will match the footpath network, but maybe we have the opportunity for a country park that arrives in the middle, an active functioning piece of farming landscape that arrives in the middle of the town. And if we allow a road to bisect it in the way it's going to, we lose that opportunity. Now, I know I'm being quite provocative here and I'm not particularly in favour of it, but I think these are questions we need to pose. Now, Hencock Pool is a Ramsar site. That's a wetland area of international importance. One of the risks here is Hencock Pool will be used to take peak flows off of this new road, and that will threaten its ecology and depress the interest there. And actually, I forgot to mention right at the beginning of this road's new journey is Oxon Pool, which is one of the Shrewsbury Town Fisheries specialist pool for coarse fish, a delightful oasis of calm and quiet. And the threat there is that will also be used to take away water from the road system. So opportunities, but also, as I say, increasing threats. And then we get onto the Huffley Lane. I love Huffley Lane. It's a glacial roundabout with roller coaster because it goes up and down and bounces round. And then I think we're pretty much at the end of our journey there. Now I've had a golden opportunity to talk about, probably in quite a negative tone, about the Northwest Road. But I was wondering whether Emma would be able to join me and help me be a bit more positive and share with us some of the alternatives. What's the positive alternatives to road building and where it could go? Is Emma there?
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah.
Oh, brilliant. Have you got a video on there, Emma?
Yeah, it is on. Can you not see it?
Okay, I'll just move around a little bit. Oh, brilliant. Thank you, Emma.
Okay.
So, Emma, would you like to just introduce yourself a bit more and
Yeah.
tell us about yourself?
Yes, well, thank you for inviting us. So first of all, I have to say I'm not going to be positive about the North West Road. I think there's very little positive to say about it, but I can be positive about alternatives. Better Shrewsbury Transport was set up specifically to campaign against this road in its latest incarnation and to talk about the alternatives. And Better Shrewsbury Transport, or BEST for short, is a grouping of organisations, including obviously the Wildlife Trust, which is fantastic. The Wildlife Trust has been much stronger in its opposition to the road than previous times when it's been proposed, and so we're really, really pleased about it. But obviously the reason for their opposition to the road is because the damage, it's become clear how great the damage would be to wildlife and habitats, and that's why the Wildlife Trust has been so firm in opposition. Other organisations, Friends of the Earth, CPRE, I knew I was going to forget some, the Green Party, the Liberal Democrats, apologies if you're here and I haven't mentioned you, there's 7 or 8 organisations opposed. And I think the just quickly to say too about that video, just a couple of things to mention. One is that the trees are all shown as fully grown. Obviously that would not be the case for a long time, if ever, because we all know how many trees die when new schemes go in. Second thing to notice is the walking and cycling path, which Pete mentioned, which is right beside. This is a 60-mile-an-hour road. That path is right next to the traffic with no protection. So it's presented as an asset and a gain for the walking and cycling network, but I really question whether anyone at all would use it if they had any alternative. And the last thing to mention is that the video showed the road on an embankment where it crosses the river. Now that has changed. I know you might be coming on to talk about the dam. The current plan is going to be to put it on a viaduct so that there wouldn't be an embankment there. Okay, so the video is a bit misleading. It's also hard to see. The road would be 27 meters above the river. You know, it's an absolutely enormous viaduct, which means that the noise will carry for miles around. You probably noticed that there's a crawler lane on that viaduct. It's actually quite steep uphill. Again, you can't see that on the video. So yeah. So we're coming up to the planning application. The planning application is due in February. I would urge you to have a look at the bettershrewsburytransport.org website, because we have made some of our own videos which we think are much more realistic about the implications of the road. And there's also a lot more information on there. And now Pete did ask me to talk about the alternatives, and I'm getting there. And I think the main alternative, well, I have to say the main alternative for Shropshire Council is to look at the evidence. This road has been proposed for about 40 years, and it is, you know, all the evidence in that time is that new roads do not, they don't solve congestion, and they don't support the environment, sorry, not the environment, they don't support the local economy. And there's absolutely masses of evidence on that. And there isn't any evidence that this road would sort out congestion in the town centre. It's interesting to have this today. I don't know if people are aware, probably not everybody here comes from Shrewsbury. But if you are, there's something called the Shrewsbury Big Town Plan, and there's currently a series of meetings talking about that. Now, Shropshire Council are very keen to say that you can't get rid of traffic from the town centre without building the North West Road. That is just not true. There's so much evidence, for instance, towns in Germany and Holland where they have zones, so you can drive in and out. You know, residents can still have cars, but you drive in and out from the outside. You don't go through the middle of the town, and that's managed with you know, with what they call road filtering, basically. But also you have a much better public transport system, and you make it much easier for people to walk and cycle. And I think we've all seen, you know, certainly during the first lockdown in the summer, so many more people out cycling. People families wanting to cycle with their children. and a huge number of car journeys are very short and could be done by walking and cycling. So that's really where we need to try and get to. So Shropshire Council needs to look at the evidence. The other point to make, there will be people here who aren't from Shrewsbury. It would be terrible for the rest of Shropshire as well. All this money is being spent on a useless, destructive road in Shrewsbury, and that money is being taken away from other communities in the county who should be getting the benefit of the money that developers pay for local facilities, which is going to have to be creamed off for this road, because as we all know, Shropshire Council is in danger of going bankrupt. So why they think this is a priority, I do not know. But anyway, I will stop there. And sorry, if there's anything I've missed, do ask me.
Emma, thank you very much. I think the issue about the investment at the point where, actually in 2019, I always wanted to share, I had to go to hospital in 2019. My doctor said to me, you're going to be there for 7 hours. I said, oh, okay, fine. I'll be there for 7. That was 7 hours in a corridor. So the point you're making there, Emma, is the investment in the road actually where the money in this county needs to go? Particularly at the point where we've called in the army to help us with a vaccination program when our hospitals are struggling. So there's a big question mark over the wisdom of this particular decision. Emma, thank you very much. That's brilliant. Thank you. If you just stick around, if I can get some time for Q&A, we will do. Brilliant. Thank you, Emma. So again, back to my technology. Let's see if I can just close that one down. So I've got a short set of slides, and then we're going to meet our next guest. These short sets, these are really sort of thinking pictures just to chuck up issues, and they would sort of lead on quite quickly to the other major topic that we're just going to gently explore this evening, which is about engineering, capital engineering schemes in response to the natural behaviour of rivers. And when I say a river, I mean two things. One is a water course, the actual channel, and the second is a floodplain. They are the same thing. They're related to each other. They are bound forever, and they are unique to each river system. They have a floodplain and a channel. They're together. And what we have globally and played out in our local area is that we tend to live on floodplains. Most of our larger settlements are on floodplains. So we have this antagonistic relationship with our rivers where we want them to do and behave themselves and stay within the channel. We need to protect our properties. For most times of the year, living beside a river is a pleasant and delightful thing. And then sometimes, like this evening, it turns into a nail-biting, appalling thing where there's a struggle, and it's a mighty and a very personal struggle. And flooding is a traumatic event when it happens. And we know that either personally within my family and certainly for many other people I meet, that a flooding event at any scale is a traumatic event. So I don't make light of that, but hopefully we'll explore some of those concepts, ideas and issues a little bit more. And as I say, we'll lead on to our next guest. So my first relationship with the river, this is from the 1940s. I'm not that old. But that's essentially me and a buddy. I normally was out on my own with a jam jar and a net. That's rivers represented that joyous thing. And it wasn't as I grew older, until I grew older, the rivers started to change their nature. And this is my river. This is the Thames. This is what I grew up with. I used to row on here and sail. Actually, just behind these old broken jetties is where I used to get in. And it's a tidal river. It's huge, it's massive, it's muscular, it's really, really dangerous, and it's unforgiving, but it's at the lower, older end of that river system. It's no longer a sparkling brook, it's a powerful thing. It's pretty smelly. The mud flats in themselves are dangerous, a unique environment to grow up as a child. But now I live somewhere else, and I can visit structures that are different and functional. So Lake Vern, we built in the Victorian era. It's a very impressive structure, captures and holds water. Primary purpose is to supply water. And the pipe actually passes through, I think it's sort of near Oswestry Way. I did some work up there a few years ago. We realised we were standing on top of the pipe from Vernwy. Phenomenal structure, but when we start to look at structures like this, we can admire the engineering. We understand their purpose and their function, but this came at a cost. It cost a large area of agricultural land. It cost a couple of small communities and individuals and families their homes. So there's a cultural impact, there's a social impact, and ecologically, what used to be the Vernwy carrying on up into the hills, there's a significant length of natural channel that doesn't exist anymore. The behaviour of reservoirs like this is their biodiversity, their wildlife interest is limited either to trout that are out in the main body of the lake. They tend to be up to a sort of 10, 20 metres, no more, sort of ferreting around, all around the margins. They're not as rich as you think. They're either carrying waterfowl on the top, or they've got the margins, or there's a small number of fish species that are quite happy to potter about either in what they call the photic level, that little couple of metres at the top where the sunlight penetrates. So biodiversity benefits, marginal. Amenity benefits, fantastic. You can sail on it, you can canoe on it. I generally cycle around it when I've got the opportunity. So there's our benefits there, but they come at a cost. So it's this cost benefit that we start to look at with an engineering thing. And this one supplies water. It's a benefit. This is the Clywedog Dam, much later. It's 1960s. It's one of the highest dams, I think, in the UK. It's a concrete structure rather than cut stone. But as you can see, it impounds a significant length of river valley. Well known for its osprey, who prey on those, as I say, those larger fish that are up in that layer, shallow enough for the osprey to grab. But it was, again, at a social cost and an ecological cost. It does supply some water, but it's also seen as a flood mechanism. And one of the things that the Clywedog Dam helps to do is during the summer, it will release flows to maintain what they call base flow. So without base flow, a river runs dry. Most rivers have got a base flow, so they can keep on flowing all year round. But for some reasons, if land use has changed, or if weather climatic conditions have changed, that base flow becomes threatened, and low water levels can lead to low oxygen when the water heats up, fish death, poor water quality, etc., etc. So the Clywedog Dam is a regulatory dam. So it's at cost, because it's the natural function has been disrupted. Sediment transport of the river has been blocked. And we know from recent research done by the University of Birmingham that plastic particulates, microplastics, will build up behind dams because they can't move down the river system, and will accumulate. So eventually you'll get kind of toxic levels of sediment and particulate mixtures. Let's see if I can move this on. So our engineering prowess knows no bounds, really. This is the Maizeland barrier in the Netherlands. It's absolutely huge. It's a very poor quality picture, but I just wanted to illustrate the size of it. Those tugboats are the normal sort of tugboat muscular things, but they're actually really tiny in comparison. The Netherlands, as we know, is a highly managed, highly regulated water environment. And this is the lengths that we will go to in order to protect our cities and our agriculture, our food production. Here on a grander scale, this is New Orleans. US Army Corps of Engineers maintains thousands of miles of levee banks, the city of New Orleans, and I have visited it many years ago before Katrina hit it, actually sits below the levee banks, rather like many other towns and cities. So the battle is set out here. There's a war going on between nature and man, and structures, massive engineering structures like this sector gate and pumping station and sluices and levee banks are in place. Billions of dollars are paid out to maintain these, and billions of dollars will be paid out to replace them in the future. There's a huge infrastructure investment, but as you can see in the distance, there's a city there. Now finally, I think I'm getting to the end of this little section just to set this out. This is the Three Gorges Dam in China. I don't think these images do justice to the sheer scale of this thing. The city of Shenzhen, of I think it's 1.3 million people, was leveled. The social dislocation of this scheme was phenomenal. I think only in a country like China, where you have quite a powerful, overpowering government, would this have been allowed to happen. And though they're producing huge amounts of hydroelectricity, it has a flood management regulatory function. I have to question, I think many people do, the cost benefit of this. And I think there's a salutary example here is the pink river dolphin, as a consequence of this river system being so fundamentally disrupted, is now considered extinct. Not a consequence that was intended by the dam, but it is a consequence, an actual one all the same. And in preparation for tonight's talk, I took a quick dive into the literature and was almost swallowed up in the papers looking at these environmental, social and cultural impacts of hard engineering structures that block, even temporarily, a watercourse. And then back to Andy's important note about the salmon, is salmon can smell like most other fish, and they can actually smell their home river, their natal, their breeding river, and disruption of our river systems by over-regulation will change the smell of them. And some of the natural phenomena like the salmon leaping over the Shrewsbury Weir, we may cause the end of that, may just trigger it, not intentionally, there's an unintentional consequence of this dysfunctional relationship we have with water. And so just very briefly, I'm aware of the time running on there. This is the Foss Barrier in York. It's there to protect residential properties. Costs a lot of money. It does work, but in 2016, because of an electrical fault, it didn't work. They didn't lower the barrier because they were concerned they couldn't raise it again. The repair cost £17 million to effect. As soon as we start to interfere in the natural function of a catchment, we have to bear the cost at some point. The cost plus the benefit is that residential area has improved protection at a point where it needs it. So it's a difficult struggle and a different argument. So I'm aware of time, so I'm going to skip over the Thames barrier because lots of these barriers are actually to do with tidal surges, whereas the barrier that's being proposed locally is a river barrier to prevent flooding without a tidal surge. Tidal surges is for another discussion. So I was wondering if, Ed, are you there to join me for a little while? Hello, Ed.
There you go. Good evening. Good evening. Peter, thank you very much indeed. Peter, if you bring up my first slide and we'll then run through those while I speak. So my name is Edward Tate. My background is soil and biodiversity, and I farm just north of Shrewsbury. I've got to declare an interest in all things river. Firstly, I've got about 4.5 miles of the River Severn running around me. Secondly, should a barrier be built just north of Shrewsbury, then I'd be one of the first houses to disappear up to 9 meters, or first parcels of land to disappear under about an additional 9.5 meter flood load. 9.5 meters, well, that's over the roof of a 2-story house. That's an awful lot of water. While I'm speaking, just read the words in front of you, and I'd like you to hold them, please. Now, had not the River Severn Partnership and the Environment Agency be trotting around the county doing Zoom conferences before Christmas and presenting the prospect of combining a dam with the Northwest Relief Road, I'd quite happily be sitting counting worms. However, what has happened is they have presented potential to dam the River Severn, which has led me to take an interest in matters water, and it's a fascinating subject. The two things to look at for us, one is that we've got to point out that we've got to look after water and that damming rivers is possibly not a good idea. And the secondly is to come up with solutions. Now, we're very lucky here. We've got the mighty River Severn, all 220 miles running through us, or partially through us. She discharges down in Bristol about 107 cubic meters a second. Now, to put that into something we can understand, that's 600 baths full a second of water down. It's a lot of water. Flooding, of course, is a great issue. So either we're going to be too dry, and it's called a drought, or we're too wet, and it's a flood. And turn on our wirelesses this evening, or switch on the television tomorrow, and news will be full of it. In fact, flooding is our largest natural disaster in the United Kingdom. Nothing new. Richard is the old Welsh Bridge in Shrewsbury, 1795. About 200 years ago, and there was the biggest flood ever recorded at 7 meters or 20 foot and 3 inches, and there's actually a record of a whole muck heap floating through Shrewsbury itself, complete with pig and hens on top. 200 years before then, again, very large floods, end of the Elizabethan age. And history does repeat itself, because at exactly the same time, we had the plague in Shrewsbury, and that was taking its toll. So we see what has happened in the past still happens today. Next slide, please. So, Shrewsbury Dam implications. Now, published in September of last year, came some papers from a presentation to Shrewsbury Council Cabinet, and in what was Appendix C then, they showed a map with a dam with a flooded area. They also showed a map, a pictorial representation of a barrier of some sort across the river in conjunction with the Northwest Relief Road. Now, as you know, the road and any potential damming or barrage has been removed. That was described in September as the preferred option. There was also made reference to secondary options upstream, and those, rather than being referred to as as a barrage of some sort, are actually named as the dam. Now, water control, we know we have to do. But should something have been put in north of Shrewsbury, a vast area stood to be flooded. Very flat, low-lying land, as you know. And you can see on the left-hand side of the screen, a slightly darker area. And that is actually taking the flood level to about 9.2 meters above the ordnance datum. Now, this is nothing new, this particular plan. This actually was last seen the light of day in 2009, when a proposal to do much the same was shown. A little bit of thought, and that would only protect Shrewsbury from flooding, something in the region of 2 days. Look in the larger light-coloured area, and in order to protect Shrewsbury from more flooding, then we'd be looking at raising the dam slightly, and that would place a much larger area under threat. Best case scenario, the smaller area would be something in the region of twice the size of Lake Windermere. Larger case scenario could be anything shy of or near 6,000 hectares perhaps. And when you think that Loch Ness is 6,500 hectares, that gives you the sort of size we're talking about. Now, a lot of that area is floodplain anyhow, and she will be flooding as we speak at the moment with the amount of water coming down from Wales. But she has built up over the last 10,000 years, her ecology has built up over the last 10,000 years to actually work with that sort of quantity of water coming down. Next slide, please. Now, there's two ways of doing it. Either we can go for a manned type option, a damming of some sort, and depending on how long the water is retained behind the dam, as my background with soil, it fills me with terror actually, because what we'll do is if you superload soil with any amount of water, is you break down the soil structure, you call anaerobic respiration, you kill off the vegetation, and you're left with a mud flat. And this is in fact on the left-hand side, Lake Windermere, part of it. And as you can see, you've just got bare earth, mud, silt left after extensive flooding. If anything about being a farmer has taught me, or has led me to understand anything in the last few years, is that we're much better to work with nature rather than in spite of nature. Now, the right-hand side, we can see a lot of tricks that we as farmers can do. And at the top, I give you a figure. For every 1% of organic matter, we can store 25 centimetres of water. In the last 5 years, I've managed to increase my soil organic matter on the farm just by some simple tricks and regenerative farming, as well as growing crops there, by slightly under that 1%. In another few years, I'll be up to that 1%. That means on my farm, just north of Shrewsbury, I'm storing an extra 25 centimetres of water. So in periods of high rainfall, such as we're having now, I do not have that runoff from the land or anything going into the river itself. These are all things that we can do, we are doing, and given the right circumstances, we can do in the future. So next slide, please. So back to what the Prince of Wales said. Solutions to flooding. Now, at the moment, the Environment Agency has been doing an awful lot of work on thinking how we can better control water. And I commend them, certainly commend them for it. One of the good things, and it makes me optimistic, is we have an awful lot of survey data on the River Severn and the surrounding areas. At the moment, within the Environment Agency, initial flood modelling has been finished, and they're now working on the business plans. And until they actually complete the scenarios under these business plans, we won't actually know what their options or what options they'll bring forward. However, one of the things that the Prince of Wales urged is possibly the best thing to do is to talk to the indigenous communities. That's you, that's me, and that's our neighbours. Because by living in a piece of land, you realise what its potential is. You realise what can and cannot be done. You realise that natural flood management, water management, and food production go hand in glove. It's not going to be a case of just planting a few trees to help mitigate flooding, but a whole raft of measures. As I said, we've got to work with nature and not in spite of it.
Thank you, Ed. That's fantastic. Now, I've realised we've got a lot of time, so Ed's put a very powerful argument there and set it out very clearly. Now, I'm just going to stop sharing for a moment. Thank you very much, Ed. Now, I'm aware that the time's run on. We were trying to pack in an awful lot of stuff, and I think our three contributors this evening have really set out some really serious challenges and issues. You know, as Ed says, there's an issue about land management and responding to his call as a person who's going to be directly impacted. He's saying, I think there's another way, folks. I think we could do something different. From Emma, there are alternatives to transport and to transport solutions and roads, and the evidence that's being accrued is saying we have to do something different. And finally, with the water quality challenges we have, that we can observe these things, they're happening, there's a problem, and clearly there's a coalition of concerned individuals and groups that need to respond to that, and for those corporations and businesses and regulators to say, actually, we've got to up our standards, our game's got to be up. Now, I was intending to do a little bit more. I think we've kind of slightly overrun, but what I do with Stuart's help, if we can field a few questions just to finish off this evening's session, and I'm sure Ed and Andy and Emma are still with us. So maybe 3 or 4 questions if you've got. So if you want to pop your videos on now, if you want to ask a question, if you unmute, and you've got the automatic hand, so if you can pop your hand up and then Stuart will lead me to you. So we've got Emma's there, Ed's back, Andy's around somewhere, but I think Andy, you might have a video problem, I'm suspecting. So do we have any questions this evening, just to finish off our session? And it'd be nice if you could turn your videos on just to see there's people there, and you might be still awake as well. Cool, hi everybody. So we've got any hands going up for me, Emma, Ed and Andy?
It looks like you've got a lucky escape, Pete. There's no waving at the moment.
I've seen one. It's Steve Jaggs from the Newport area. Over to you, Steve. Question.
Just coming back to your first point about discharge, what feedback are you having from Severn Trent? Because obviously they're the ones who are going to have to do the infrastructure work. They're very big at the moment on trumpeting green credentials. Are you getting any positive feedback?
I think it's, I mean, in brief, yes. The answer is yes. The Severn Trent, like the other utilities, have a 5-year business planning cycle. And one of my contacts in the waste management, the corporation split into different things. So they certainly know that they can't address the issues in a 5-year cycle. This is a long-term investment. They monitor all discharges and they have a hit list. I think what's important for us as local residents and concerned people in terms is to say, what's your plan, folks? Just let us in here, reassure us that we're on target. But also there's a citizen science opportunity for us to say, actually, we think this one's really a problem here. Is this a priority on your list? And double check. They're open to challenge. Severn Trent would prefer us to be proactive participants in water management, and maybe just gently say, look, we think you've got the wrong priorities here. And other communities around the country are just approaching the water company and saying, is this on your map? Just double checking, is this on your map? Have we got this one? What's going to happen? How long do we have to wait? What can we do? So the answer is yes, but a lot to do. Okay. Any more questions from anybody? Pen, down in my bottom right of my screen. Do you want to unmute then, Pen?
Okay, it's just a quick question. Maybe I should have listened harder. How can we access the map that shows where the sewage discharge is?
I think I'll just point, Michelle, can we share the website details, maybe at a later date. I mean, we have got a web page, Pen, on which that link is on. So if you go onto our website,
I can put it in the chat now for you as well, if you like.
Yes, please. Thank you, Michelle. Okay, we've got any more questions? We've got time for 2 more, I reckon.
Has the information shared, Pete, of these arguments against the dam? I mean, how's it sort of the joined up thinking strategically?
Okay, that's a very good question. I think maybe I'll hand that to Ed. Is the Save Our Severn campaign? I know that me and you and others are working closely. How are we making sure that we're staying in contact about this, Ed?
Thanks very much for a question. Good question. Right. First thing to do is actually keep an eye on Shropshire Wildlife Trust. And also there is Save Our Severn, both of information coming up, which is continuously updated. One of the most important things that we're driving for, and it's twofold. Firstly, you've got to have that left-hand boxing glove on to point out why dams are a really bad idea. Any GCSE revision notes will tell you they displace indigenous populations, they silt up, and they produce greenhouse gases. But what you've also got to do is to make sure that the right people are talking in order to get the solutions. And we've got some really exciting university work. We've got some really exciting natural flood management projects across the country, which is all quantifying results and giving really good alternatives to hard engineering. We say keep the hard engineering in the hard environment, that's in the towns, and then let nature do what she does best. And that is to protect us and help us and give us a brighter, greener future.
Thank you very much, Ed. Mike Morris, I saw you sent me a message or hands up. Go on, Mike. Mike is the Chief Executive Officer of the Severn Rivers Trust. So this is going to be a challenging question, Mike. What have you got for us?
No, it's not a question actually, Pete. It's a follow-on from the last one, just to try and allay some fears for a few folks. Firstly, thank you for putting this on. It's been really interesting. And hello, Emma. She used to work with my wife and haven't seen you for ages, so it's lovely to see you. Yeah, just to answer that particular question, myself and Richard Grindle, the new CEO of Shropshire Wildlife Trust, both sit on the programme board for the River Severn Partnership. This is my take, not Richard's, but my position on that board is to make sure that these conversations are had and that the natural processes of the River Severn are considered. So to everybody listening, please be assured that there are voices on the board who are fighting for the natural process and the natural resources of the Severn, and we will continue to do so.
Great. Thank you very much, Mike, and that's a good point. The other point that Mike would make in time, and I'll make it now, is that there are catchment partnerships already in place and have been for many, many years. There's the one that's most pertinent to this particular issue is called the Severn Uplands Catchment Partnership. We, with Severn Rivers Trust, host the Shropshire Middle Severn Catchment Partnership, which is essentially North Shropshire. But we tend to find that the members of that are overlapping in many cases. And I'd also like to let you know, as an interested audience, is it's not just professionals like myself. We are very keen for individuals concerned, interested individuals to join those catchment partnerships. So if you feel that this is a topic that just sets you alight and you want to commit some time to it, please do get in touch with myself and we can get you connected up and part of the partnership. I know that John, who asked the question earlier, is on one of my mailing lists that I put together around the Shropshire Rivers Hub, which is a little communication thing we look after to make sure that we stay in touch with people involved in the river. So this evening may be the start of an exciting journey for you. I've got time for one more question and then we need to close the session. So can we see a hand? Is there Jeffrey? Please go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, Jeff.
Yeah, I run quite a big fishing thing like Andy Jones. We're further down the river at Bewdley. And again, I'm a match organiser and we organise matches. And again, like Andy, we have terrible problems with catch rates where, you know, again, we've got big competitions where we've got really top anglers from around the country. And for no apparent reason, you know, we just don't catch any fish. So I've taken it up with the Environment Agency, and they issued me with like an oxygen meter to test the oxygen in the river. Yeah. And it's quite alarming that sometimes the oxygen levels are just, you know, they're ridiculous, from virtually none to, you know, sort of 120%, 130%, you know, and with these levels, fish just will not feed. Yeah. But then further on from that, then we started having trouble with, there's quite a lot of bird life at Bewdley, and quite a lot of the swans, which on a low river, they will just go through the gravel and stuff, became quite ill with actually a couple of deaths amongst them. Right. So I took this up with the Environment Agency, and, you know, they are quite helpful in some ways, but there's never, you know, a 100% answer. You know, I don't think they would like to point the finger at anything, but they did say it was a lot of algae and stuff like that, which was coming down the river, dead algae, which was possibly coming out of the dams and things like that. Okay. So it's not, you know, it's not a thing what just happens in one area where this sewage goes in. I think the whole of the River Severn is problematic all the way through.
Thanks, Jeff. I think I identify what you're saying, oxygen availability. One of the functions of untreated organic effluent, as soon as it starts to break down, is to use up all the oxygen in the water. And what you're saying there is even the river at the size it is in Bewdley, we're reasonably familiar with it, the oxygen levels will still plummet. So we have some significant challenges, and with waterfowl like swans, they tend to be sitting at the top of the food chain there in lots of ways, and they're taking up toxic elements and chemicals, and eventually it will make them sick. So I think thanks very much for that, Jeff. And I think I'd like to thank everybody very much for turning out this evening. Hopefully you've seen a few grains of stuff that you've not seen before that might itch away. We do have, you know, some challenges to come up for those of us that feel that the road building is the wrong thing to do. That will be in February. There's a planning application through there. We also feel that there's a massive question mark against massive, huge capital concrete engineering solutions. But there are glimmers. There's a whole landscape. There's over 2,000 square kilometres of catchment above Shrewsbury that, with the work of people like Ed and other Indigenous communities, we think that there's a solution there. There's some change there. There's some investment that could be made. I'd like to wish you a safe journey home, but you are home, so this is brilliant. A nice result. Take care, everybody. And I say one last little thing. If you think these are useful and you've got a topic, just let us know. And me, Michelle and Stu will see what we can do. And obviously our guy Tim down there. Make sure this all holds together. So thank you for your patience. Take care, everybody. See you soon.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks.